Hello and welcome to my show Indus Cuisine, and I'm your chef Basim Akhund. We're back with another new episode from the heart of Pakistan. Today's recipe is very interesting, and this recipe is basically a coastal favorite of all the Pakistanis from the province of Punjab. We're making a prawn curry which is named as Makrani Prawn Curry. Now what you might be thinking is that what is Makrani or Makran? Basically, when you talk about the city of Karachi and you see that belt of sea or the seaside going through Balochistan, there are cities such as known as the Makran city or the Makrani people or the Makran coast. Then there's a place called Pasni over there, and these small, you could say, village city towns have their own local favorites, and this is one of the local favorites over there. For this recipe, the ingredients are very simple. You need around half a kilogram of small or medium sized prawns. Then you need around 2 to 3 potatoes, which would be approximately 300 grams. Then you need around 2 onions. You would require around 2 tomatoes and some cabbage. After that, you will need some lemon juice towards the end, and you need some green beans. If you do not have green beans, you can also use okra for this recipe. I am just telling you a replacement. Why? Because at times you cannot find those. Then you need some desiccated coconut. Desiccated coconut is basically the dried coconut which is shaved to form this. It's a very delicious thing. You should use it in your food, but not every recipe goes well with it. But this recipe is something which basically can be cooked in harmony. Then you need some garam masala. You can use Kashmiri garam masala. It's the best one. It has the best flavor also. You need some cumin seed. You need some salt to taste, some ginger, some garlic, some red chili powder, and some clarified butter. This recipe will be a recipe which you can enjoy with rice or with a naan bread or with roti. Roti is also called a flat bread, which is basically made on a straight pan on fire, and it is delicious. But the form of roti has 2 types. So the first one is basically made out of the wheat flour, which is basically the brown one, and then there's another one made out of the white flour. The one which is used in Pakistan more is the wheat or the brown flour one. Okay, now coming back to the recipe today, what we shall do is we shall require a wok. I shall keep the wok over here and bring it to heat. Once the wok comes to heat, we shall brown 2 onions after finely chopping them. So I'll keep 2 of the onions over here, and we shall just finely chop them. I shall half them first, keep it over here, and make these cuts slowly. Cut it from between and go as close as possible. Always keep your knife's blade clean so that you can get the best cut possible. Take the root out and keep it on the side. This is the best way of cutting the onion. Why? Because you get the perfect cut and the onion will basically not be mixed. Slowly and gradually will take you a long way. Remember that. Keep the root on the side. You don't need the root. The root is basically something which holds the onion together, and that is what helps the onion to stay together when you're cutting it. If the onion starts dispersing everywhere, what will happen is that you won't get the best cut possible. Okay, now I shall just finely chop it, and once I'm done, I shall just add all the onions into the pan over here. Keep it as close as possible. You will get the best result. This is done. Now I shall pick this up and throw it in the bin. This goes in the bin, and we shall add some clarified butter. Now we will be using around half a cup of clarified butter, and today's recipe is basically being cooked for around 4 to 5 people. Now you might be thinking that's so much of clarified butter with only half a kilogram of prawns. The reason behind that is that the prawns are just being used in this recipe for the flavor. But this recipe is, you could say, more vegetable dominated, because we'll be using a lot of other vegetables which will go into this and will give this recipe a very nice flavor with the flavor of some prawns also. So what I'll do now is I shall just pick this up and transfer it over here. Now let me tell you one thing. If you basically fry the prawns, what will happen is that the flavor of the prawns will get mixed with the oil, and then if you add the fried prawns into the food, you won't get that flavor. Now remember, whenever you're making gravy or stew, you need the flavor of meat which you're using, and for this recipe we are using the prawns, so I would like the prawn flavor to be mixed with this properly. I shall take around, you could say, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and that is it, and we shall start mixing this up. Let this fry properly, give it a lid and let it rest for, let's say, around 5 minutes. Now I'll be cooking this for 5 minutes on low heat, so I shall reduce the heat so that the onions basically get nicely translucent first and then they get brown. On the other hand, what I'll do is I shall pick up the tomatoes and we shall just take the eye of the tomato out from here by just slicing it a bit. This is done. I shall pick this up and I shall throw this in the bin over here. When this goes in the bin, I shall process this into a fine paste in the food processor. So I shall just make 4 pieces of the tomatoes and that is about it, not more. Remember, this recipe needs to have a very fine texture, so that's why I am basically slicing the tomatoes like this into 4 halves each. I shall pick this up, keep it on the side. We have a leaf over here which basically fell from the tree, and that's why I keep my food covered with cling wrap. But it's fine, it's on the you could say marble over here, so it doesn't make much of a difference. This goes in and we shall convert this into a fine paste, and once it's done, then I'll let you know what to do next. So as you can see, the paste is ready. The paste needs to be super fine. If it's fine only, then you can basically put it in your food. Otherwise, the texture of this recipe will get, you could say, off the charts. Okay, now what I'll do is I'll keep this on the side, and you can see the onions are basically starting to get really soft. Just start mixing this. And now you take the lid off and let the onions fry for, let's say, around 2 minutes more. Till that time, what I'll do is, for this recipe we need some ginger. I'll keep it over here and I shall just slice it like this. When this is done, I need to cut the ginger super thin. I want the slice to be a little thick, but the slices of the ginger otherwise should be thin. So I shall just go super close. When this is done, we shall keep the remaining on this side because this will be used later on in the recipe. I shall pick this up and I shall transfer this into the onions and fry it for, let's say, not too long, but just for around 2 to 3 minutes. I shall pick up around 3 pieces of garlic. I shall put this over here and just press it like this. Why? Because I want the perfect cut. Okay, bring it close together and just keep going super close. This is done. I shall just scoop it up, transfer it in and start mixing it. So till the time I cook this, we'll go for a short break, and once we're back from the break, I'll let you know what to do next. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching Indus Cuisine. Welcome back. You're watching Indus Cuisine and I'm your chef Basim Akhund. During the break, I just waited for you, and the only thing that happened was that this was converted into a fine paste and the onions are nicely brown. As you can see, the onions are crispy, they're brown. We should just mix them. Why? Because the brown onions on the outer side of the wok should be pushed in, and then you should see the color. Okay, now this is done. Now what I'll do basically is I shall add some cumin. The cumin goes in. And then we shall add some red chili powder. The red chili powder goes in. When it's done, what I'll do is I shall just mix this up. And as you can see, the heat is on pilot. Why? Because the pan is already hot and I do not want the onions to get too brown. They're perfectly brown and that's about it. Okay, now whatever I've used, I'll just keep it at the back because I do not need it anymore. Now you need to add a few things. You need to start adding the food in the recipe. For that, what I'll do is I shall take around 3 potatoes and we shall just finely cut them. So I'll just half the potatoes first, and then we shall cut them the way it's basically done in the coastal side of Pakistan. Okay, so we'll just cut the potatoes in a way which you might have seen everywhere when you make basically a potato stew. So we're just making these small slices which are almost just half an inch thick. Now you have to maintain the thickness of each slice. Why? Because if the thickness is maintained, then only you shall get the perfect cut. Slowly and gradually will take you a long way. This is done. Okay, now what I'll do is I shall add the potatoes into the wok once I increase the heat to full. So what I'll do is I shall fry the potatoes in this oil for 1 minute on high heat so that the potatoes get a nice, you could say, light crispy layer on top. And then we shall add the other ingredients. So on high heat, just mix it up. You can see the color is also basically coming on the potatoes. This color comes from the red chili we've added in the oil and the onions. Give this a lid and let it cook for 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes maximum. So once it starts getting really hot, start counting 1 minute to 2 and then take it off. Okay, now when this is done, what I'll do is I need some green beans. The green beans will be kept over here. Firstly, what I'll do is basically it takes a lot of time, so I shall just take the top and the bottom part out of the bean. So till the time I'm doing this, you can just take a few shots of the pan and then you can see how it looks over here. So once everything is done, what now I shall do is I shall add the desiccated coconut. The desiccated coconut goes in and we shall start mixing it properly. Mix it for, let's say, around 30 seconds on high heat so that the desiccated coconut gets a nice color. And also remember that desiccated coconut is almost dry, so you can see now that the oil from the pan has almost vanished. Now this has happened, why? Because the desiccated coconut basically absorbed everything, and that's why this was the time I added the desiccated coconut in the potatoes, oil and in the onion mixture. Now when this is done, it's been 30 seconds, what I shall do is I shall pick up the jug which has some water and I shall start adding around, let's say, a cup into this, and that's about it. This goes at the back. We shall start mixing it. And as you can see that the brown color of this recipe has come from the onions which we browned. That was the reason we basically browned the onions for. Okay, now the green beans are done. I've basically taken the top end and the lower end off and I shall just pass the knife once through it. This is done. Pick up the beans, transfer it over here and start mixing it properly. Once you've mixed it properly, I shall just add another half teaspoon of salt. Let it cook on, let's say, low heat for 5 minutes. So till the time this is cooking, we shall just clean up and then I shall tell you the next step. Why? Because we need to wait for this water to evaporate. Remember that. I'll show you what to do next just in a bit. Once you can see the oil coming up on the wok, basically that means that around 85% of the water has evaporated. Now what I shall do is, this is the time to basically add the tomatoes in. Why? Now you might be thinking, the tomatoes are always added to a point when the oil is basically surfacing for this recipe. Why? Because then the tomato paste, which is over here, which is a raw paste, let me tell you again, it's a raw paste, will be cooked efficiently over here. So I shall just take the lid off and transfer all the goodness from this into this. Increase the heat and shake it up. Keep this at the back over here. Try not throwing it inside. Why? Because you can damage your equipment, and once you damage the jug, this could go to waste if you don't find a replacement. Okay, now I shall start mixing this slowly and gradually so that the tomatoes basically cook nicely and also get the perfect texture. As you can see over here, the potatoes are ready, the green beans are ready, and now comes the time to cook something else. So now what I shall do is I shall keep this on the side and give this a lid. We need to give it a lid so that basically the evaporation is controlled and the tomatoes get a nice cooking effect inside. Okay, now we need some cabbage, which I'm using. It's a, you could say, purple one. There are two forms in Pakistan and we'll be using this one. Just slowly and gradually pass your knife through it. And this is done. You can look at the texture from inside. It's beautiful, and the great part of cooking over here is that you get really fresh produce in Pakistan, and you get fresh produce on every corner of the city. Okay, now I shall take my paring knife, and as you can see, there's a stem over here. We'll take this out. We shall just cut it like this and take this part out. Why? Because it's the most tough part of the vegetable and it doesn't go well with the food. Okay, I shall just cut it like this in front of you, and we shall just finely start slicing it slowly and gradually. Balance it and go slowly. Now I shall just slice this also like this. Pick your knife up if the vegetable or the meat piece is high. Remember that. When this is done, we'll be using half of it, and there's a part of the root over here, and I shall throw it in the bin. Now as you can see, the tomatoes are nicely cooked. It's time to basically add another few things. Just mix it up once. You can see the oil is up. And now I shall add all the cabbage. We're using the purple cabbage for this. As I told you, this recipe has a lot of vegetables and a very nice flavor to it. Okay, now just mix it up. I shall just use another one. I shall use this one, and I shall just start pouring the hot gravy onto this. Now what will happen eventually is that this will also start splitting, and it will also give out its own water. This vegetable also has moisture, remember that. So when we'll give it a lid, it will start getting softer and softer as it is cooked. But do not break it, always turn it around. And this is done. Now we go towards the last steps of the recipe. The last steps of the recipe basically include adding the prawns. Now I've basically added a little bit of salt to the water, and I've just kept the prawns in that. I shall drain the water out slowly. Once the water is drained properly, I shall just transfer all the prawns into this. Remember, you must de-vein the prawns before adding them to the food. Remember that de-veining the prawns is a very integral part. It's very important for every recipe to get the best flavor. And if you do not de-vein the prawns, your food will start smelling. Basically, what is the vein? Vein is basically all the dirty intestines of the prawn inside, which you do not eat. It's like cleaning an animal's stomach. Okay, this is done. Mix it up. Now, as I said, we'll be adding the prawns towards the end so that the flavor of the prawns is also mixed with the food over here. Now for that, what I need is I need a little bit of water. I'll be adding another half cup of water into the food. This goes in. Now we shall pick up the ginger over here, and we shall just finely shred it. I shall finely shred the ginger and then add it at this step so that the ginger gives out its flavor freshly into the food. Slowly and gradually will take you a long way, remember that. This is done. Now you don't need this. Pull the ginger out from the grill over here and transfer it over here. Keep this at the back, you do not need it anymore, and just mix it back again. Now this ginger will give the gravy a very, very nice flavor. Keep mixing it slowly and gradually. And this is almost done. Now we shall add the last things. But before that, I need to clean up, and then I shall show you the final steps and then the final look of this beautiful, delicious recipe. Everything's almost done. Now we just need to add just around 2 tablespoons of lemon. Now what am I doing over here? I'm pressing the lemon against the board so that the lemon gets super soft. It's basically a traditional way in Pakistan to make the lemon soft, and when the bits and pieces inside the lemon open up, that's when the flavor is properly and evenly released. Okay, now just cut it and pour it, squeeze it over here. Slowly and gradually squeeze it. It's a big lemon. We need only 2 tablespoons. I've washed my hands before I started recording, and this is the only way I can stop the pits of the lemon from falling in. When it's done, keep it on the side. Do not add the skin because the skin is super bitter and you don't want that going in your food. Remember that. Okay, just keep it close, keep pressing it around, and this is done. Wash your hands thoroughly first once again, and now just start mixing it up. Increase the heat to full. You can see it's a nice curry. It's a nice prawn curry with a lot of vegetables. You can have this with rice or with naan bread, as I told you, and towards the end we shall add the garam masala. This is done. Now I shall just mix it up. And now we shall serve this food in front of you. I shall show you the final look of the recipe. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching Indus Cuisine. As you can see, today's recipe is ready. I'll see you in another episode of Indus Cuisine. Take care of yourself, lovely people. Have a good day. Bye-bye.